What's the outlook looking like for the FMCG space, or the consumer sector? Harish Bijoor, who's CEO, Harish Bijoor Consultants, and Harsha Razdan, partner and head consumer markets and internet business, KPMG, both join us with their perspective on the same. Harish, let me start off with you first. Good morning. You know, we've seen tremendous volume growth, very robust volume growth numbers from all of the leading consumer companies that have reported Q3 earnings thus far, indicating that, you know, that concern about there being, some sort of slowdown in consumer demand may be misplaced. What's your sense?
Yes, for sure. You know, FMCG is the happiest story we have in the economy today. If FMCG is the happy end, then the other end is actually real estate. So we tend to understand that the real big story is FMCG because it's about real consumption. It's not about savings. It's not about a shelter product which you want to buy to keep for some other day, for a rainy day. It's about using it today. And I think India is getting to be very eat more brands, drink more brands, partake more brands oriented. So brands, good values, FMCG of every category, from the humble Parle G to the most expensive in the biscuit range, doing completely well.
Right. Harsha, what will be your call as far as FMCG is concerned? You know, we've seen auto numbers slowing down. We've seen some consumption data which pointed out that there could be slowdown in the month of November, December. But some of these good brands, some of these companies that have reported so far don't really point out to.
Yeah, if you look at, I think FMCG in India is riding a buoyant India wave very clearly, and for the near short term to long term, short term to medium term, will continue to maintain robust numbers. And I'll amplify it with a few dimensions, if I'm allowed to. I think if you look at our macroeconomic fundamentals, I think there is enough data talking about GDP being robust, our population being in the right age group, the per capita income being at the right tipping point. Even the consumer, I think, is ripe for moving from something that he needs to something that he or she desires. Data costs has come down. E-commerce is helping reaching areas which were never reached in the past 2-3 years. So I think macroeconomically, consumer-wise, we are right. We are right. It's ripe for the picking for FMCG industry. I think three more aspects which I think are helping industries continue to deliver the growth that they thought may potentially slow down, but it is not slowed down. One of them would be around rural. And the rural thrust continues. We've seen results even in January, which talk about how the rural growth has outpaced urban growth. The government has not slowed down investment at all. We've heard about all the investments in the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee, NABARD spending huge amount of money in the rural. All this is going to give a huge amount of disposable income, which sort of is spurring rural demand. And then if you look at GST, which was, I would say, the biggest economic reform over the last 2 years, it seems to have stabilized. And the government is beginning to rationalize slabs one after another. The last release of the government talked about 6 items, which were actually supposed to be the Aam Aadmi picks. And the GST slabs were reduced. So even that is helping lower and lower pricing, translating for the consumer and eventually spurring demand. And then lastly, and thirdly, and not the least, I would say, is that the budget that is expected to come out, I guess, will be populist in nature for sure. Now, with a lot of focus around rural, a lot of focus around how GST slabs can make it easier for the Aam Aadmi, and I would say a lot of focus around employment, maybe even a few income tax cuts. So given all this, I think the story for FMCG is around consumers, consumption, and spurring the investment cycle. So there's no reason to sort of be conservative in the short to medium term, I would say.
Right. We were making the point earlier, Harish, about how a large part of the consumption story is being driven by rural income, but that rural income is not only getting financed by agri income, that the rural income definition is expanding, which essentially entails income generated through infrastructure, through the services sector, which is penetrating deeper, And so that sort of diversification is also giving a leg up to the overall consumption trends and the overall consumption numbers.
Yes, for sure. In fact, the rural economy has always contributed a faster pace of growth for FMCG. The rural economy in the worst times, when urban consumption of FMCG was stagnant and there was a recessionary pressure about 4 years ago, was still growing at around 26%. And the story is really ripe fundamentally because the rural economy remains a very, very deep cash economy. And the cash in this economy is a reasonably unaudited part of the Indian economy. And how much ever, there were efforts to actually take the cash economy out and convert it into a digital economy or a check economy, things haven't worked. To an extent, the fact that the rural economy is deep in cash, very tactile with cash, is helpful to items of immediate consumption such as FMCG. Consumption out in rural really happens in two peaks. One is the Kharif peak and one is the Rabi peak in this country. And there are several areas, at least 21 areas where we have 3 crops happening today. So rural is certainly the big story. A quick one on the budget. I think the budget and what the budget is going to announce, I don't think it's going to impact the FMCG category at all. I think the FMCG category has already discounted the budget. Very strictly speaking, because budget which is announced at the last minute is considered to be not so there. And I think, that is going to be a part of the discounting process. So the robustness will continue, and I don't think the budget will do anything positive or negative to the FMCG category.
Right, fair enough. Harsha, you made an important point about how there has been a bit of a contribution coming in with the GST rates and the slabs there being revised lower. How much do you think, could that act as a catalyst? Because these numbers are not set in stone. We are still toying with the idea of perhaps 2 rates at best. There's talk about convergence to 1 rate. From a taxation point of view, how much do you think can drive the contribution to the overall consumption trends?
So I think the FMCG industry has already started translating those numbers of benefits to the public. I think in one way it's not going to be anything additional which will happen unless the government gives further tax slab cuts. When you ask industry leaders, I think everyone is being conservative in terms of not commenting whether it's only GST or other parameters which are driving or not driving growth. But I think certainly it is playing an impact. Otherwise, only a rural kind of angle and not a tax angle would have never taken us to this kind of a number. So I think overall rural GST and I think the budget sort of just continuing to give the same fate to FMCG firms will continue to maintain the trajectory of growth that we've seen in the last year or so.
Okay, finally, in conclusion then, Harish, do you think that the new run rate is currently low double digits, but moving towards mid double digits or into the teens in terms of the growth trend on volumes?
I think this will happen fundamentally because a lot of the unbranded commodity consumption is actually moving into the commodity terrain. The moment it moves into the commodity terrain, there is a higher degree of recording of the actual robustness that you will see. So branded companies, FMCG companies in the space of brands of every kind, from the bottom of the pyramid brands to middle of the pyramid and top of the pyramid brands, will see a great degree of resurgence. So expect a lot of action. I call it the storm after the storm. It's really not the storm after the calm, because we have never had a calm in the FMCG market for a while now. And touch wood, I keep touching wood all the time and saying that, let this continue. I think this prosperity is great for every FMCG company around.
Right. Thanks so much, Harish Bijoor as well as Harsha Razdan for joining us, telling us what's happening in the consumption pack. If there is one space which is showing growth, is the consumption pack so far. And we had 2 experts telling us that it is GST, what's happening in rural, which could have an impact.